Tufale, a dynamic tech founder, advisor, and innovator on a mission to shape the future of software and startups. Omar bridges the gap between technical execution and strategic growth. He advises startups on product architecture, scaling, and sustainable technology practices, helping visionaries turn ideas into robust, real-world solutions.
Was there something you found out when you started working that the university did not prepare you for?
That's a good question. So I went to university not through the traditional route. The traditional route being you go to school and then you go to university. I went to school and then dropped out and then went to work in my mum and dad's business. And then doing that for a long while, I was like, I need to be doing more than this. But the reason I bring that up is that university wasn't the thing that I went to first. It was the thing I went to after having spent a long time in a real world business. And in that business, I learned about customers. How do you deal with people? How do you do customer interaction? What is a customer? And I learned that not from a theoretical, understanding or from a professor giving me a lecture. I learned it every single day. And the funny thing is, where we are right now, my mum and dad's business was like 10 minutes that way.
Really?
In Oswald Street.
Wow.
Like 2 minutes from the central station. So I was in the heart of the city centre. And all the buses used to come in Oswald Street. So anyone that was working in the city centre, whether they were like a CEO or just, on frontline desk, they were all coming in through Oswald Street, and my dad's and mum and dad's shop was the first shop. So it was a retail shop, and I would meet all sorts of people, and I say to people, I would meet CEOs and junkies on the same day, and I feel privileged that I met that spectrum of people, because each of those two categories of people and everyone in between, I got to see the good and the bad. And I had to serve them. Do you know what I mean? And I had to figure out, how do you deal with difficult people? How do you make sure the customer's satisfied? And that is the core of any business. It doesn't matter if you're selling software or donuts or Lamborghinis, right? You need to understand, what is it I'm doing here? How do I serve this customer? How do I maintain boundaries? What things am I willing to do? What things am I not willing to do? Because there's red lines there as well. When we deal with customers, I'm there offering a service, but it's not at any price. Do you know what I mean? There are things that I put in place to go, here is how we are going to interact. Here's what I want for you. I want you to be successful. Here's what we can offer. So I learned so much before I went to university. So I call that, it sounds like cheesy when I say it, but my first university. My mum and dad's university. And everyone has that, right?
Not everyone.
Not everyone. No, unfortunately. Not everyone has that. But I was privileged enough to have that. So before I went to university, I spent a whole chunk of time in that environment, learning about a whole bunch of things, from how to manage cash flow and how to manage people, how to manage customers, all that. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it every single day. So, it wasn't easy when I look back on it either. The shop had to be open at 6 o'clock in the morning.
That's painful, man.
And it closed at 6 o'clock at night. That's a 12-hour shift, 6 days a week. But when I look back on it, it was fun. We had a riot. Me and my brothers and my sister would be there, and a whole bunch of staff would be there, mum and dad. And we were given a lot of autonomy to do things. So that's a whole chapter of my story as well, or several chapters. What I learned there. And I learned to interact with people from all backgrounds and beliefs and positions in society. And I'm super grateful for that. So it gave me a lot of confidence as well. and it made me feel that I belong as well, in a big way. So that's what gives me my rootedness. So so despite what's going on in the US and the UK, no one's going to tell me who I am or where I belong, because I know through where I grew up and where I learned my first education with my parents. So that's all before going to university. But when I was there, I was like, I need to go to the next level now. I need to do something more. And then I had like an interest in technology, and I started reading books. And then I taught myself how to program.
Wow.
Yeah, standing behind the counter. I would read the books and serve customers, and I taught myself how to program. And then I built my first website. And it wasn't just like, in those days, there was no Squarespace and Wix. It wasn't like drag and drop. There was no AI. I was like hardcore coding
HTML,
this.
PHP.
HTML and PHP.
I used to do that too.
And databases, MySQL.
I hate it.
I didn't even know what a database was, but then I figured it out. I built this website. And then I was like, there was a travel agent next door, and it still exists. It's called Barhead Travel. And the guy who owned it, Mr. Monroe, he built this thing from like a tiny little company to it's a massive company now. And he would come in the shop, and I was like, and I would talk to him. And I'd go, Mr. Monroe, I'm leaving. And he's like, what? What do you mean? I was like, I'm going to start building websites. And he's like, really? Why don't you come and see what I'm doing? And he had this massive like tech team, and he introduced me to the team, and he was like, Omar's going to join the team, and tell us what you know, Omar. So I was like, I've learned all this stuff, and I was telling them all about social media and all this kind of thing. And so that was the first thing that happened after I left the shop. I started working for Mr. Monroe and his travel agent next door. And that was so amazing, because he gave me, like, he didn't look at like, here's just like, who's this guy? He's not got a university degree or nothing. He gave me full access to people in the company, and he believed in me. And I was like, let's go. So we were doing all sorts of cool stuff in this massive. So 1 minute I'm behind this counter selling like, newspapers and sweets, and the next thing I'm in this travel agent. So it just shows you anything can happen in a second through just a connection. But yeah, that happened, and then I started making websites for people. But then I was like, do you know what? I'm just making this up as I go. I don't have a formal education. Maybe these people in the university know something that I don't know. I need to get educated. So I didn't have any qualifications though to go to university. So I did an access course, which was a year-long hardcore physics and maths crash course to get me into university. And I was hungry. I was like, I need to do this. And I smashed that, gone to university, and I did this degree, computing science. And then I thought, when I went to university, because I never thought I would ever be in that environment, I was like, in every lecture, just soaking it up. I was like, I can't believe this guy's talking about algorithms, and she's talking about operating systems. I'd be like 100% soaking it all up. I wasn't like, I can't be bothered being here. I was hungry for it, because I would look around the lecture room, and a lot of people were like cruising. A lot of people were hungry as well, but I was one of those. I'm so glad to be here. I want to pick everything up. And then what happened after that? Then I thought, I love this. I'm going to do a master's. And I did a master's. And then the stuff that I was doing in my undergrad and my master's, my dissertation, it was looking at how do you bridge this gap between academia and industry, because I had come from the real world.
We are going to talk about that. I learned, my research showed that you turned your research into a business. All of the things you've mentioned about how you first went to work for your parents. So all of the things that you've mentioned, you deciding to go work for your parents for a little bit, working for that travel agent to gain real life experience.
Yeah.
taking a 1 year crash course in math and physics to be able to quickly be able to go to the university. Then I think all of these things prepared you to see things from another perspective. So that means whenever you are seeing the teacher, the lecturer teach about algorithm, databases, they are things that you've struggled with in the real life.
Yep.
You know how important it is in the real life. It is not this for you is not just about passing the course.
No.
This an information you if you soak it up,
I can see
you
it
can see how it's going to benefit you outside of school. And again, this now went further. You took this further, and you did you turned your research into something that is a pain point to you. That is how do we connect academia to the real world? And you turn this into what you're still working on right now as Loopsio. I want you to talk to me a little bit about how did you came about all of these things? What made you decide to turn your research into the work you do now? How are you able to recognize the opportunity? How do you spot that opportunity?
There's no one moment, I suppose, where I went, right, this is a great opportunity. I suppose it was like a progression in that when I was in my final year and during my master's, I was looking at, I had learned so much about software engineering, and you're right, I had practical experience. So while I was at university, I was able to see how the stuff I was learning fit into a real world context, and that is something that students don't get at university in the main. You mostly learn about the theory of things, and you might do projects here and you might do an internship there, and those are super useful because they allow you to see the connection between what you're learning and the real world. Otherwise you're just going to become an academic, right? And most people that go at university, 90% of them go out into the real world. And the thing is, when you go out into the world of industry, then there's a gap between you entering that world and you being useful in that world, because you don't know how it works. You don't know how to interact with people. You don't know the ABC or the terms or the things that matter. So you're a junior, you get mentored and you shadow people to learn all of that, and that's what's called experience. But I went into university with that kind of reversed. I learned about customers, I learned about all that stuff. What I was missing was a formalized, structured way to understand the technical side. And so while I was at university, I was researching this gap because I knew it was there. And academia knows it's there as well. And industry knows it's there. So I wasn't the first one to spot this gap. There's a whole literature, academic literature about this gap. How do you minimize it? How do you take people out of university or a formal learning environment and make them productive in the real world? Because it costs money to train people up to be productive. It takes time, it takes energy, and that's why experience is valued. If you say to me, Omar, I've got 5 years of experience, I'm thinking, right, I don't need to take this guy from 0. He's at 5. I need to take him to 6. But if I need to take you from 0, that's a lot of effort. But the reason companies do that is because people at that end, they have a lot of value to give in terms of new ideas, energy, innovation. And so companies take these new people on because you need new people to replace the people going out of the company. There's a big cost there. So companies want to reduce that. The world wants to reduce that. Young people want to reduce that because what's going on right now is that you've got young people going to university who are learning about computing science and software engineering, and to pay the bills, they're stacking shelves at Tesco while they're at university. And I'm like, that's just nuts. You know about databases, you know about backends, you know about APIs and all that stuff. Why are you doing that job to pay the bills. So I was like, wouldn't it be cool if you could get work experience while you're at university and get paid, and by the time you graduate, you're not going out into the world with a bare minimum of experience. You've dealt with like 5 customers already. You've seen, you know, the challenges that come from interacting with people in a team. You've pulled a project over the line. So that was the thinking, you know, like, why are these young people not being, you know, productive while they're at university? They want the money and the experience. So the demand is there from them. The demand is there from industry to have young people coming out of universities with more than just a degree. So there was all sorts of like signals, and there was a desire for me to work in tech and to work with like talented young people at university and be connected to industry. So there was all sorts of things that, you know, ticked the box for me. And there was all sorts of things in the market that were like, we want this.